Happy New Year. We are sending Happy New Year to Washington, D.C., where we have our good friend, Dr. Zineb Riboua. Hello, Zineb. Happy to have you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
I think it's exactly a year since you've been with us and you told us 10 laws how to reach Trump. And believe me, we reread it every now and then because I think you are the most spot on.
Thank you. I'm glad it's actually useful.
I think it's very useful. Starting with law number one, guys. If you haven't read Zineb's 10 laws how to read Trump, do it, and also subscribe her Substack because I think this is something. So I recommend it to everyone.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And we are sending a happy new year not only to Washington D.C. but to Iran. There things are happening, and that's why we have you, Zineb, to tell us what's happening there, what's happening in Tehran now in a protest that are happening as we speak, and also broader Middle East. So happy to have you, and Dan, shoot the first question.
Okay, my first question before we start discussing the subject matter is, especially because of lack of information, we would like to know what's exactly happening in Iran, how serious it is in your opinion.
Well, I think that what is happening is an accumulation of a series of popular discontent with how Khamenei is managing the water crisis, the inflation, a lot of other issues relating to healthcare, education, but also he is dealing with an environment he just wasn't used to prior, an environment where the United States is enforcing sanctions. And I think that's a very important point, and I will get back to it maybe later. But the regime as it is functioning, it's functioning with tools that are extremely weakened. And obviously there was also previous discontent with the Masa Amini protests in 2022. Khamenei was absolutely brutal. This new generation of Iranians is completely alien to the ideology of the regime. I mean, they see how Azerbaijanis are living, how Emiratis are living, how Saudis are progressing, and they look at themselves and look at the country where they're at. Absolutely a rich country with a lot of potential, but it is locked in these. Conflicts and proxies across the region. There's also something that I thought was interesting to mention is that so the budget of the Islamic Republic is constantly gradually shrinking, because the national revenue is based on oil and they sell it at a discount to China. There is that, but on top of that, they actually sent a raise to the IRGC. I think it was a 24% year on year raise, and an average Iranian sees that he's not well paid. He gets water shortages and electricity shortcuts and all of these things, and an Iraqi militia officer is paid better than him, and so I think that this is a real structural issue that no matter how repressive the regime is, it cannot deal with it properly.
Actually, who is on the street? Um, Age wise, class wise, geography wise, and also I have a twofold question here for you. How does Iranian society look like in general?
Yeah, so it's a very young. There's a lot of young people now on the street. It's a 90 million population, and from what I've seen in the maps that are going around regarding the protests, well, all of the cities are protesting. The major ones, 27, from what I can tell. But it's also in different regions. For example, Sistan, Baluchistan, Azerbaijan province, but also a lot in Tehran. And Tehran is very important because that's really the clergy security establishment of the Islamic Republic. And so I think that the regarding the age, a lot of young people, but also there were a lot of mothers, a lot of housewives, a lot of average employees and merchants that were out, because the fact that they were able to kill more than 100 officer, I think that meant that a lot of people were in the street and across ages.
And you talk about young people, and if we look really on a sociology of Iran, it's a young population. Is there some elderly? Is there some old-fashioned people who are supporting the regime? So how big is the, let's call it, young class?
Well, the young class is actually pretty significant, and for the elderly, I can't tell because for now what we see are more videos and scattered protests here and there. So it's very hard to actually establish. But what I'm given are more of approximations. But sorry, if I can just add that. So I just saw right before talking to you guys that the Islamic Republic, the officers have killed so many people to the point where the hospitals are overwhelmed with the bodies and they're stacking them on top of each other. That's, I think, something that will fuel public rage among the elderly because they see their own young daughter or a son getting shot as well.
Uh, how important for this wave of protests are women? Because we can see a lot of women in the streets, which is not common. What we could see in the protests in other countries. So I would like to know. Would you say that the women are the driving force of these protests? And if yes, what is the reason?
Yeah, I wouldn't say actually that they're the driving force, but that they are also playing a role. It seems that the discontent is just across gender, across age, and across also status. In a sense that the because of the casualties that we see, I think it means that not just women are out there protesting. But what I would say though is that because of how the Islamic Republic is structured, it's actually women who see in first hand the repercussions of a regime like this one, in the sense that they a lot of them they have to stay home even after getting an education. They are the ones who need to feed the kids. They are the ones who have to do a lot of these things, and they see the money shrinking. They don't have enough, and so they're the ones who are the first receivers of every single thing that the Islamic Republic does. So this is how I would frame it. But this is, I think, very different than from the Masa Amini ones that were much more focused on women's rights, but also were. I think what happened with those previous riots was that I think the hijab and everything was part of a symbol of the clerical security establishment, and the protests were against it. But the deeper roots were, I think, what we see much more in a transparent way now.
You recently written a lot on the topic, and you wrote about, you call it, strategic failures of the regime. So, and you argue that because of these failures, regime's crisis is irreversible. Basically, you are doing thumbs down on them. So, if you can describe how you think about these strategic failures and what are the most visible ones.
Yeah, sure. So I think that for an Islamic Republic like this to exist, that has an ideological aim that wants to be, the great regime in the Middle East, but also in the world. They're just things you cannot afford to do as a leader. And one of them, as I wrote, was underestimating the water crisis. And I basically explained how bad the water crisis is because of the mismanagement, because of the bad policies, because of the different actions that are degrading the environment and making Iranians' lives miserable, but also because instead of dealing with it, they went out and told Iranians, oh, actually, this is happening because Israelis are stealing the clouds, and the Turks are the ones diverting the rain. Iranians are not stupid. They hear these things and they know that it makes absolutely no sense. So, not dealing with the water crisis is the first one. The second one is that I think Khamenei, because of how the regime is structured, relies on proxies a little bit too much, and he takes them for granted because the whole economic system is now set up so that whenever there is some money, it goes to Hezbollah, it goes to Iraqi militias, or it goes to these other proxy in Syria or elsewhere. But here's the thing: you are investing in proxies that completely got eliminated by Israelis. So he and in fact, he did not rectify his model after Israel's operation in Lebanon against Nasrallah and others. He actually kept doubling down. And that just tells you how another mistake that Khamenei is doing, that he's diverting and wasting resources at a time where he has real structural issues. The other thing is that I believe, in any dictatorship, any regime of this sort, that he just doesn't know what is going on. He totally underestimates and underestimated Israel's success in the 12-day war, where they actually completely wiped out the chain of command and really weakened the intelligence of the Islamic Republic, because they have destroyed the intel officers, etc. And I don't think that they realize how bad of a situation they are, because a lot of these men are irreplaceable, or very hard to replace, and it takes a lot of time. And he did nothing to adjust any of it. The other problem that I see, and this is maybe related to Venezuela, is that Khamenei kept on provoking Trump in a very gratuitous way. I mean, he went and was doing these, I think, postures saying that Trump will fall and that he's like the pharaoh, and that he's a fallen leader and things of this sort. And if there's one thing you can learn from Maduro, is that you can come on TV and say "Come get me" and that and sing John Lennon songs. It does not end well. So I think that Khamenei is really underestimating Trump, because if there's one trend with Trump, is that whenever he says something, he follows through. And that's another, I think, mistake that he's committing. The other mistake, and I believe this one is medium long term, is that the Islamic Republic needs people to believe in it. It's a revolutionary regime. And when you have a young generation that no longer fears you, believes in you, you actually already collapsed the Islamic Republic project, because it means that the proxies you've built up um, are not. Uh, are not going to get any support, because the new generation of Iranians sees them as their enemy. And one last point that I think is a very important mistake that Khamenei is making, like many others, is that because of his relationship with Putin, but also with Xi Jinping, he thinks that he's protected by an anti-US alliance. But there is no such an anti-US alliance. There is an anti-US coalition of benefits. If there is one thing to learn from Putin, is that he sees everyone as replaceable. So what he did, for example, is that he needed drones for his invasion of Ukraine. He got the drones from the IRGC, and the IRGC were the ones helping him with the know-how. And what he did a year later was that he transferred the facility from Iran to Russia and Tatarstan. So he actually does not need the Iranians anymore. Or if he does, it's very much less than 2 years ago. So I think that there is a mismatch in how Khamenei imagines himself as being protected. Also, Putin did not save Assad. And it's funny, we had a conversation, I think, a year ago about Assad, and I thought he was going to go. And I think there's something similar in there. Also, Xi Jinping is very concerned about any direct confrontation with the United States. He also has a long term vision. So if he sees that Khamenei is committing mistakes, he's not going to come and rescue him. He's going actually to position himself so that whatever comes next can benefit China as well. And this is something that Khamenei seems to be completely misreading. So I think that these series of mistakes, that I can see how Khamenei is making that, explain how he is being cornered, and he cornered himself in this.
Okay, so if I understand it right, uh, you're trying to say that the economic situation of Iran is so bad that this is probably one of the reasons why these protests can succeed. But what are the other elements that could help these protests to be successful?
I think that there is, I think, two elements, I would say. The first one is the United States intervening and hitting the besieged forces, the repressive forces that are the ones involved in suppressing the population. I think a U.S. intervention or an Israeli intervention I think, accelerate a lot of that. The other thing is that, for a real I think for a real systematic or systemic change, you also need some elite defection or the elites joining the protests. You need to see IRGC officers fighting against each other. I think killing IRGC officers is going to somewhat provoke a discussion, but the tensions need to grow much more, so that we see a real, I think, momentum in Khamenei's collapse in that way. Um, I think these two are very important. This is why I think the fact that they're burning mosques and burning government buildings, a lot of this scares the elite. So it's more of a wait and see, and we'll see how these things go. But my general point is, the Khamenei is making so many mistakes when it comes to understanding the United States and trying to circumvent sanctions, that he doesn't have the assets to fix a lot of the structural discontent.
So Khamenei is pretty old.
Yeah.
I would say very, very, very old. So let's say that he will survive this wave of protests. Still, what's the future? Because these kind of regimes, who will be heir in most of the regimes, excluding North Korea, it's always been a problem. It's always been a problem in the Soviet Union, in Russia, in Venezuela as well. So how do you see it?
Um. He doesn't have nuclear deterrent. That's actually very important because um, because it means that every mistakes he makes only accelerates his losing the grip on power. And 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 because of what I explained, especially on the new generation and the discontent, and also just not managing just the basic needs of the population when it comes to water, electricity, also food, because the inflation is horrendous in Iran right now, and it's only going to get worse because they're not trying to fix it. So I just don't see it ending well. There are a lot of analysts who disagree with me because they think that the regime survived before, or they're trained to survive these things. But my argument is that yes, but the regime actually this time did not survive Israel attacks. This is the first time that there's a huge Israel success. And usually, when you lose a war, there are consequences of that. Um, you either need to reinvent yourself and completely change so that you can at least mask the weaknesses, buy some time, focus more internally, which is he's not doing, or it's a gradual collapse because when you are a revolutionary regime with a theocratic leaning, because actually the ideology of Islamic Republic is very interesting because in their mind, with the because in their mind there's also the martyrdom, etc. Well, they think that they can commit no wrong, and that everything is a transition. It's just chaos, but they will always triumph. So they're not reforming. So this is why I disagree with a lot of analysts, and I think that this is a bleak path forward.
So before we can discuss more deeply the different scenarios of the future after the regime collapses, maybe I would like to know what do people in the streets really want? What is their desire?
Well, it seems that they really want a regime change at this point. This is what I see in the protests, but they also want some basic needs and rights, because I mean, as you can see, they shut down the internet and they started massacres because they dared to protest against the inflation, against a lot of these things. So I think the a regime change is what they want, which is why today Khamenei set up this huge I think protest that is pro government, and it's really like all the IRGC housewives and their kids going out in support of the Islamic Republic. So it's actually I think a regime change type of demand.
My question is, I don't see similar, but we talk a lot about internal pressures, yeah. So we talk about young generation, also, I would say, destabilization of the regime due to Israeli strikes last year, also Khamenei age, also sort of like gerontocracy kind of. Among top ayatollahs. Not only Khamenei is very old, but many others as well. But if we talk about possible current pressures, you already mentioned, and it's written as a law number one in your 10 laws of how to read Trump. If he says something, he will do it. So what's your thinking now? Trump happy after Venezuela. He loves winning. Do you think it's possible that U.S. military will just come again, maybe together with Bibi's people? I mean, Israelis.
I think it's a possibility. I Because I saw that a lot of outlets are saying that Trump is thinking of a lot of military measures against the Islamic Republic, and I think it's on the table. And with Trump, there's some one thing is that military operations are always on the table. They really crossed that red line when Trump said, "Don't shoot the protesters, don't go after them, don't kill them," and they did. On top of that, they did shut down the internet and then went mocking Trump as a fallen leader. So there will be, I think, consequences for that.
Okay, so maybe from the other side, not from the Trump or Israeli side, but from the supporters of the Iranian regime, you have already been talking especially about Putin, who is not, for him, is everybody irreplaceable. So there are remaining two countries, especially China and North Korea, but I'm afraid China's position is clear. It's non-intervention. And North Korea's probably unable to help Iran in any way. But Anyone who could help Iranian regime to stay at power?
Actually, I think the proxies can help. The Iraqi militias can come and try to. The Iraqi militias can come and try to help the regime sustain itself, especially against the protesters. But the thing is that they need to get paid. So where is the money? That's the question. The Hezbollah can also maybe join, but the thing is, I saw yesterday that there was an operation against Hezbollah by Israelis, so that changes the dynamic as well. Um, so I think for now it's really the militias that can really inject money and more manpower to counter the protests.
But isn't it, sorry, Anna, isn't it that Hezbollah and Hamas are the parties that are supported by Iranian regime? So they probably can't help Iranian regime when uh, they are dependent on the Iranian regime. Is it right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if the Islamic Republic collapses, it means that they collapse as well, and it seems that they are going to be willing to fight until the end, for the regime to survive. But they also make other calculations, in the sense that, well, they can always, join. Some militias, they can make a calculation that, okay, we see the regime collapsing, maybe we can make a deal with the Americans. We will let go of this or that, and get some protection. At least we don't get killed. So there are other calculations that can be made, but I'm pretty sure that the regime will do whatever it takes to survive, and the militias might join as well because of the ideological and martyrdom culture as well.
So let's say regime won't survive. We know from many other cases in Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, that it's not. It is complicated to win the war, but even more complicated what will come after the war.
Yes.
Uh, so what do you think will be if regime will fall? What will be the future? Reza Pahlavi, monarchy? I don't know. Secular presidential republic?
Yeah. Well, I think that there are two major scenarios that I see, and it will depend actually on what Trump thinks as well. Because he did an interview and he said, someone asked him about Reza Pahlavi, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll see who actually rises as the next great leader." So he's putting him in a I think in a platform where he will have to compete with others. Why? Because I think that at the end of the day, if the regime collapses, the IRGC will try to save itself, and will try to maybe strike a deal and to go towards a Syria model where a lot of the officers don't get shot or killed, and they can stay alive, with the condition that they get into a secular, much more pro-Western Iran. So there is that as well. It's a scenario, I think, among others. But it seems that Trump is setting the stage so that there's a lot of competition, and that he will be the ones who decide. And I think we're going towards that. It seems that that's what he wants. He doesn't want to make any decision on, because at the end of the day, they will need, I think, U.S. support on what to do next, so that it doesn't go towards a civil war, ugly scenario.
Okay. Also, I know that it depends on the concrete scenario, but I would like to know. Iran's economy is very deeply connected now with Chinese economy. So I would like to know what would happen, because I would expect that it depends on the scenario, but in most scenarios, I suppose, would be this case, the Iran economy would turn back to the West, or at least more. So, how do you see this development?
So actually, from what I understand, from a China perspective, is that because they actually already signed a 25-year agreement and cooperation, and they are already locked in a lot of investments, etc. They might try to keep that even if a new regime emerges. And they might try to keep the ties with Iran for the simple reason that Pakistan, for example, is a huge client of China. So there are different ways I think the Chinese can reassert themselves. But I mean, from the statement, I mean, there were no major statements other than, as you said, no intervention. That China is really just also in a waiting and see mode, so that. For example, if there is another IRGC, secular, or maybe if Reza Pahlavi rises, they can still talk to him. They keep everything, they keep all options open, because Iran is such an important part of their Middle East chessboard. I think that they will do whatever it takes to at least keep the ties. And they've done that in different areas. They've done that in Libya. They've done that in Syria. They're doing that in Yemen. I think that's how they play.
So we mentioned Trump, what he wants. You just spoke about Chinese. What we have three other big players in the Middle East: Saudis, Israel, and also Turkey and Erdogan. What do they want?
So I think that there is now a huge, I would say, there are two clubs. I think Israelis are very, very, I think, bullish and really want a regime change because it will solve a lot of their external issues, national security, and other things. That is, I think, set. Saudis and the Turks as well are very much worried, because Saudis have experienced what it means to be to depend on the United States and to have a U.S. foreign policy that is constantly volatile, that changes all the time. One time they're against the Houthis, the other time they're not. I think Saudis are very worried about that type of flip flopping. It's unlikely to happen under Trump, but I think that's a very reasonable thing to be scared of. For Turkey, I saw that Hakan Fidan yesterday said something that the regime is not going to collapse, and that these are protests, etc. But it seems to me as well that they're also very worried for the same reason as the Saudis. Why? Because they are actually competing with Iran in Iraq. They are the ones who helped with what is happening now in Syria, to the point where the Iranians no longer use Syria as their backyard. Um, and so I think for Turkey, they're absolutely worried about what will happen next, because it means that the conflicting strategy that they had with the Islamic Republic needs to be revised, etc. It will demand a lot of adjustments on their end, because they had to either accommodate the regime at the request of the United States, or just learn how to live with it and take any strategic advantage when it presents itself.
We can see a lot of dramatic changes, especially in the South America, like Venezuela, and the pressure of Trump on Colombia. Of course, there is a Javier Milei success in Argentina, which could inspire, well, let's say, right-wing parties in other countries. President Lula's in Brasilia position is quite weak now. So what would collapse of Iranian regime would mean for the global South, in your opinion?
Yeah, it actually means many things, but the main one is that they were big on promoting the this anti-America alliance to the BRICS, and they're the ones who are the future, basically. And the Islamic Republic regime promotes that ideologically speaking, but also finances it with the proxies that undermine U.S. allies, and a lot of that. So I think that it means for the global South that they will just not be seen as strong and as reliable. It also means that they will think twice whenever they make a decision to collaborate with Putin, because Putin just does not save either Bashar al-Assad or Khamenei. In fact, he didn't save him in a 12-day war as well. So that just tells us about the status of the alliance of Russia, China, Iran as alternatives to the US led order. So I think that the global South will be much more inclined this time to see the US led order as much more reliable than any time before.
One topic that very much interests Mr. Trump is price of oil.
Yes.
Uh, Unlike OPEC players, either Saudis or Russians and others, basically the big producers who want to have a pride at the right level, meant up, up, up. Trump wants the opposite. For his success now in midterms, it's to put price as much low as possible. Also, it's is his personal rivalry pricing now under his leadership and before Joe Biden. He talks about it a lot. That's why he just 2 days ago run his uh, oil CEO roundtable with everybody pushing them. You need to invest in Venezuela. Price need to go down. Of course, if there will be regime change in Iran, price would go down as well because the sanctions will go away. This is good for Trump. How you see the dynamics then, because Russian state budget is unmanageable under, let's say, at $58 a barrel. Saudis and others, they would like to have a price up as well. So how you see then the dynamics in broader, we can call it OPEC, or even broader, like the states who are exporting. Have you any opinion on this? Let's call it economic aspect. If sanctions on Iran would go away, what it would mean?
It would mean exactly what you said. It's very funny, but actually, Trump had this idea of just getting all of the oil out there for a very long time. I think he spoke about it in the 90s or something. I will have to find it, but but it's a scenario that he wants because it's the only way for him to weaken Russia's war machine, an economy machine that is behind the invasion of Ukraine. So I think that would play in a grand, very instinctive way for Trump. This would make perfect sense, but obviously it would mean that Saudi Arabia's national revenue will also decrease. So there may be tensions in there, but it's also something to to think about when it comes to geopolitical balance, in case Khamenei collapses and we see more Iranian oil. But one thing I would say is that once Venezuelan oil hits the market, Iranian revenue will shrink because they have one buyer and it's China. But 90% of the oil goes to China, and it's on a discount. So it means that we'll have to offer a discount on top of a discount that will only shrink the revenue further. And that's, I think, an outcome, a direct outcome once Venezuelan oil hits the market.
Okay, and the last question from my side. Uh, would you say that the collapse of Iranian regime is probably, or eventual collapse, it would be probably the most important geopolitical event within, let's say, 30 years?
Yeah, I think of the century, honestly. Um, um, well, the other event of the century will be about the invasion of Taiwan or not, and what the United States will do about that. Um, but it will definitely be a huge event in the sense that it has an ideological dimension, of an anti-U.S. regime that sustained itself. It has an economic dimension, and it also means a completely different Middle East. And that I think really matters for great power competition that the United States is engaged in, and for the rivalry between the United States and China. It means that there will be more opportunities for the United States to rectify past errors, but also to benefit from new openings. And so, yeah, I think that would be absolutely the case.
For me, same question, but more sort of like zoomed in on the region. We see a lot of changes since Trump won. Abraham Accords, changes in Saudi Arabia, which are huge. This is for another podcast. What MBS is doing there, it's really unbelievable. I've been in Riyadh recently 2 times, and a number of cranes over Riyadh. I couldn't like when I stopped when I hit the number 50. Like and it's not only the changes in hardware, but also minds of people and liberalization. Of course, we can talk about Qatar. We can talk about, of course, Emirati. I'm always positively touched when I land in Abu Dhabi that if you are when you are going from the new airport to the city, then you have a mosque and synagogue and church together as a symbol of sort of like liberal values of all Abrahamic religion in Emirates. But let's say that Iranian regime will fall. What it will mean for Middle East?
Um, it means so many things, but I will summarize them in three. The first one, it means that the rivalries we traditionally see are going to change in terms of Israel against Iran and its proxies. It means that we will see different ones because Turkey, for example, is right now on a collision course with Israel when it comes to Syria, for example. So I think that we'll see a very different. Different landscape in which Israel will have to operate, and where the United States will have to operate. But it also, I think I saw a Bloomberg article saying that it means civil war and absolute collapse. There's that as well. Things can go wrong. But less likely so if this happens under Trump, for the simple reason that Trump will want it to win and will make sure that it does, etc. So that's how I think about it. The Another thing that I believe will be very important is the future of the proxies, because the proxies, they can operate without the Islamic Republic. They adhere to a doctrine, but they have legitimacy in local instances. So a proxy in for example, Iraq or elsewhere, they can find a way to survive. And that will be a very difficult question when it comes to counterterrorism missions and doing more on that front. It's I think people think of the Islamic Republic as simply a state, but it's a revolutionary doctrine with militias across the world. It also means that Iran is going to get richer. I mean, there are millions and millions in frozen assets um, that will be used, and I think that will be a question as well for the future of the region. How they will be allocated? Is it to support Iranians or to support something else? So yeah, this is basically to give you just a great outline of what I think is quite important.
That was Dr. Zineb Riboua from Hudson Institute, Washington, D.C., United States. Thanks for being with us,
Thank
Zineb.
you very
Always a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you, Dan and Jan. I appreciate it.
And see you soon in Washington.
Yes, I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Say all the best to our friends.
I will.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye bye.